This is the iPhone 16 Pro, and ever since this phone was announced, I've seen a decent amount of negativity from people, which, if I was to sum up, would be a lack of excitement about what Apple has changed and updated with their phones this year. But, in my opinion, as a filmmaker, if we're talking about the video capabilities of the iPhone 16 Pro in particular, this phone is a really great upgrade and has easily the best video quality that you can get from a cell phone, and arguably some of the best audio quality as well. So in this video, I'm going to be reviewing the iPhone 16 Pro from the perspective of a filmmaker and telling you if it's worth purchasing, especially if you're upgrading from a phone that is several years old, like an iPhone 14, 13, 12, Android phone, etc. Also, for the sake of ethics, I want you to know this video is not paid or sponsored by Apple. I bought this phone with my own money. Getting right into it then. If you are not coming from an iPhone 15 Pro, but from an earlier iPhone, I've heard from many people that still have an iPhone 12, and they're wondering if it's time to upgrade. And let me just say, if you are someone that records videos with your phone, I cannot overstate what a massive upgrade the iPhone 15 Pro was from a video quality standpoint. The 15 Pro added Apple Log, which boosted the phone's dynamic range, making it much more competitive with even mirrorless cameras from the likes of Sony and Panasonic, while also significantly dialing back the over-sharpening effect that typically plagues most cell phone videos. Pair that with the ability to record a very high bitrate ProRes video file that could hold up very well to heavy color grading, and Apple has essentially given you an incredible filmmaking camera that works way better than anything we've had in this size and form factor before. The iPhone 15 Pro was good enough that I filmed a wedding with it last year, and the footage looked great. Likewise, news recently broke that the director of the movie 28 Days Later, sequel to the much-loved 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, he actually filmed the new 28 Years Later movie with the iPhone 15 Pro. It's pretty wild stuff, and anytime that I've posted about filmmaking with the iPhone 15 Pro or 16 Pro, I've received multiple comments from people telling me that nobody's filming anything professional on a phone. But that's simply not true. While you are busy typing an angry comment about how useless an iPhone is for filmmaking, there are professionals out there that are creating movies that you're going to watch in a theater with this device. So, I'm sorry to say, but you're factually incorrect. So to sum up my feelings about whether you should upgrade to the 16 Pro or not, if you are coming from any iPhone earlier than the 15 Pro, I would at the very least recommend upgrading to a 15 Pro for these video quality improvements, and heck, you can probably find one for a good discount now that the 16 Pro is out. But like I said at the start of this video, in my experience, the 16 Pro does offer some really nice upgrades over the 15 Pro in the realm of video creation. And if you are someone that only upgrades your phone every 3 to 5 years, it may be worth it for you to pony up more for the 16 Pro to be better future-proofed and have the phone last longer. Regardless, let's now turn our attention to the 16 Pro now and talk about all of its upgrades and new features, because for me, coming from the 15 Pro, there were definitely upgrades that I wanted to see, some of which Apple gave us, and some of which are still missing and that I'm still hoping and waiting for. Up first, let's talk frame rates. For 6 years now, yes, ever since the iPhone X back in 2017, wow, that's a long time ago, Apple has been stuck with a maximum frame rate and resolution of 4K at 60 frames per second on the iPhone. To be clear, this has been very usable, and I filmed most of a wedding last year with this resolution and frame rate on the iPhone 15 Pro, but this is also a time whenever other cell phones and a lot of other professional cameras out there are capable of recording in higher resolutions like 6K and 8K, which I don't really care about that high of a resolution as much, but these cameras have also been able to record at 120 frames per second, which is far more interesting to most filmmakers, I think. Personally, I'm more of a 60 FPS guy. That is my go-to for filming slow motion because I think that footage at 120 FPS looks a bit too slow at times. And in addition, once you start filming at higher frame rates like 120 FPS, you start to run into more issues with LED lights flickering due to wonky refresh rates, etc. So, like I said, I usually stick to 60 FPS. But I just said the word usually, meaning that there are definitely situations where I feel like 120 FPS is warranted. So I was so thrilled, and I'm happy to tell you that the iPhone 16 Pro is now capable of recording video in 4K at 120 frames per second. This is something that you may be really excited about if you're someone that films at 120 FPS often, which I know there are plenty of you out there that do, so you can make yourself known in the comments. Or alternatively, you may be indifferent to this frame rate, but to that I say, hey, just because you do not need this feature now doesn't mean that you're not going to be filming something in the future where you wish that you had just a bit more slow motion while still having a high resolution video, and that is where you're going to love having the option to film in 4K at 120 FPS. Now, that said, about how great 4K at 120 FPS is, I do have one big caveat that I discovered after purchasing the phone that you need to be aware of, and that caveat is that while, yes, the iPhone 16 Pro can absolutely film in 4K at 120 FPS, it can only do this with the main camera. It is incapable of filming 4K 120 with the ultra-wide or 5x zoom cameras, and I've really not seen many people talking about this. I don't think that it's a deal breaker that only the main camera can film in this frame rate and resolution, but it's definitely a surprise considering that all of the previous iPhones were able to film in all frame rates and resolutions with all of their cameras. So Apple is clearly pushing the tech pretty hard to be able to film in 4K 120, and I suppose we'll have to wait for the iPhone 17 Pro to see if this high of a frame rate and resolution is supported with the other cameras as well. Just another thing to ask Apple for in the future. Speaking more about frame rates now, we need to talk about another upgrade that Apple added to the iPhone 16 Pro, but I want you to know this is just a software upgrade for iOS 18, and it's also available on all previous iPhones as long as they upgrade, and regardless, it's great to see because it's filmmaking related, and we need to talk about it. This upgrade is that Apple allows you to adjust the frame rate of video after you filmed it. Apple realized that this is something that filmmakers are going to want to use relatively often, especially if you're creating content for social media, so they added the ability for you to simply go into the Photos app, tap the stopwatch button, and then slow down the frame rate. Now, this is done in the typical Apple way of giving you some control, but not complete control. So as a professional, I would really prefer the ability to adjust the video frame rate by an exact number. For example, slowing 60 FPS footage down to exactly 23.976 frames per second. But unfortunately, you're still going to have to use a professional video editing software for that, and you're going to be more limited in your choices for slow motion frame rates in the Photos app. But hey, it's better than nothing. Next, for upgrades that I really wanted to see from the iPhone 15 Pro, I was really hoping for better low light performance and image quality with the zoom and ultra-wide cameras. If you've used an iPhone before, it's pretty much always been this way. Apple prioritizes video quality of the main camera above all else, and while the phone has two other cameras, an ultra-wide and a zoom, those feel kind of like afterthoughts. So I was really hoping that Apple would improve the image quality with these other cameras on the iPhone 16 Pro, and I'm happy to tell you that while it isn't perfect, Apple has answered at least part of my requests. Yes, the iPhone 16 Pro's ultra-wide camera has been significantly improved with the addition of a new 48 megapixel sensor, which records video that is noticeably sharper and more detailed than the previous version on the 15 Pro, and this is especially obvious toward the edge of the frame in any footage that you've recorded. In my testing, it doesn't look like there's a big jump in low light performance with the ultra-wide camera, but as long as you have enough light, I still think that this is a good improvement. And if you're someone that likes the ultra-wide look, which I especially do for establishing shots, etc., I think that you're going to find yourself using the ultra-wide camera even more often. Unfortunately, though, I cannot say the same for the 5x zoom camera on the iPhone 16 Pro. To my eye, the footage from this camera looks very similar to footage from the iPhone 15 Pro, which means that if you have enough light, let's say you're filming outdoors on a partly cloudy day, or you're filming in a studio with a lot of light sources, you're going to be perfectly fine, and I think you'll be really happy with the quality of footage that you get from the zoom camera. But once the sun goes down, you're going to want to either stop using the 5x zoom entirely or invest in a good set of lights, because if the iPhone has to increase the ISO levels for this camera, good luck. It gets noisy quickly, and overall the image looks basically identical to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Here's hoping that the iPhone 17 Pro completes this upgrade process now. Come on, Apple. If you've upgraded the ultra-wide this year, you can definitely upgrade the zoom next year. Moving on, the next upgrade that I wanted to see from the iPhone 16 Pro was also something that was unfortunately not included, but I'm hopeful that Apple could add it in a software update whenever they want to. Here's the deal. If you want to film in Apple Log using the native iPhone camera app, which, if you remember me talking about earlier, Apple's going to give you the best possible video quality from the camera with much less over-sharpening and better dynamic range. The image is gorgeous. Trust me, you want to film in Apple Log. Well, the issue is that it's only possible to film in Apple Log if you also film in the ProRes video codec, which is a fantastic codec. Don't get me wrong. It's very easy to edit, and it's also supported on pretty much all video editing software. It's great. The only con is that ProRes is a very large file size codec. And in addition, if you want to film in higher frame rates with the iPhone 16 Pro, like 4K at 60 FPS or 120, you have to connect an external SSD to the USB Type-C port on the bottom of the phone to save the files, because presumably Apple doesn't want you completely filling up the iPhone storage space too fast, because remember, ProRes creates huge files. Thankfully, here's the big workaround for you. If you choose to use the Blackmagic camera app instead of the native iPhone camera app, that app gives you two huge benefits. Namely, you can film in higher frame rates and resolutions directly to the phone storage, frame rates like even 4K at 120 FPS, which, to be clear, the iPhone 16 Pro is capable of recording 4K 120 in ProRes with Apple Log to the Blackmagic camera app, but I'm also going to warn you, please do not try to do this immediately after you set up your phone like I did, because the Blackmagic camera app is going to start flashing an exclamation mark at you, indicating that it's dropping frames, but this is not due to the phone being incapable of recording in 4K 120, it's because the phone is still setting up a lot of things and running a lot of background processes, and this can result in the processor and storage not being able to keep up with the high demands of 4K 120 FPS. So give your phone a few hours or a day after you've set it up, and then I'm happy to tell you that the iPhone 16 Pro is capable of recording these frame rates and resolutions internally using the Blackmagic camera app. In addition, and this is really the big upgrade and my favorite reason for using the Blackmagic camera app, you can also choose to film in Apple Log using the H.265 video codec instead of ProRes, which, keep in mind, H.265 is going to give you dramatically smaller file sizes while still keeping a very comparable image quality to ProRes. So can you see why I love the Blackmagic camera app? It essentially removes a lot of the limitations of the native iPhone camera app for Apple Log and gives you a smaller file size in the process. I love it. But that said, there is still something so great about the native iPhone camera app and how user-friendly and simple it is, plus how quick it is to open and get filming. So my hope for the iPhone 16 would have been that Apple recognized, hey, Blackmagic's already proving that we do not need this artificial limitation on frame rates, only being able to record higher than 4K 60 to an external SSD. And look, they're using a more compressed codec as well. So please, Apple, give us a software update that enables us as filmmakers to record to our iPhone's internal storage without an SSD, and give us a toggle to be able to film in Apple Log in H.265 as well. We would love that, please. Those are really the only things keeping me from loving the iPhone native camera app. Thankfully, Blackmagic does have our backs as filmmakers with alternatives, so it's not like it's the end of the world. And I want you to know I have a tutorial showing you how to use the Blackmagic camera app for the iPhone 15 Pro, which I will link to down below. And you can let me know if you want me to make an updated version of that video for the iPhone 16 Pro. In addition, if you want some color presets for Apple Log that look fantastic, I'm happy to tell you that I've created a set of presets that work beautifully with log footage from any camera, including Apple Log, and I will link to those presets down below. Talking more about the 16 Pro's upgrades now, this is not an upgrade that I knew that I wanted, but one that I'm happy to see included, and that is the addition of Apple's new camera control button. Yes, I remember reading rumors from even a year or so ago saying that Apple is planning on eventually getting rid of all the buttons and ports on their phones, making it just a touchscreen that charges wirelessly. Thankfully, that did not end up happening, and as a filmmaker that has multiple cameras that have a lot of buttons on them, I'm a big fan of buttons, and I think that they definitely have a place over a touchscreen. Heck, there's a reason that Sony has not made their cameras just a giant touchscreen with no buttons on them. Humans like buttons. Talking about this camera control button in particular, in typical Apple fashion, they wanted to cram a ton of capabilities and versatility into it. So you can press it like a normal button, you can half press it for different things, you can swipe your finger across it to adjust settings. There's a ton of versatility here, but it's also very overwhelming whenever you first use the phone. It definitely took me a while to get it dialed in and working how I wanted it to. First, though, I need to address the elephant in the room, though, and that is that I am left-handed, so I'm normally holding my phone in this hand here, and I was really worried about this because I hold my phone in my left hand, which means that my finger is pretty much always going to be touching the new camera control button, and that I may be triggering it accidentally. Thankfully, once I had the phone in my hands, I discovered that I was wrong about that theory because the camera control button is very flush against the side of the phone. Even if you pick it up with a decently firm grip, it's hard to accidentally trigger camera control, which is a big relief. Of course, if you're concerned about this, I'm happy to tell you that you can go into the phone's camera settings, and there's an option for you to toggle that will require the camera control button to be double tapped to activate it, which will remove a lot of the stress of accidental activation. So if you are dealing with your fingers accidentally activating camera control, by all means, activate this setting as well. Anyways, in regards to camera control, Apple showed off a ton of different features in their keynotes where they were pressing this new button, including ways to change and adjust a lot of the settings, as well as the ability to half press the button to lock exposure and focus before fully pressing it to start recording a video. Unfortunately, that half press feature is not available yet, but Apple says it's coming in a future firmware update. But the ability to heavily customize the camera control button and change settings with it is already available. Personally, after using the camera control for a little while, I settled on two settings that I really prefer using with it. The first is a setting that allows you to change your exposure by swiping. Changing exposure in the native camera app without camera control is kind of a pain because you have to tap on the screen, then drag up and down, and if you already have the camera focused on something, it's going to refocus whenever you tap on the screen. It's just a bit cumbersome to adjust, especially if you consider that iPhones are not always the most accurate when it comes to exposure, and you sometimes need to bring the exposure down to keep it from overexposing. Camera control makes that much easier, and I really appreciate it. Secondly, I'm a fan of using camera control to swap between the ultra-wide, wide, and zoom lenses. No taps on the screen required to change cameras, just swipe to change your focal length. I'm a big fan. Please note, you can also set camera control to zoom in and out, but considering how much video quality you lose whenever you digitally zoom in on a video instead of just changing the cameras, I pretty much always just recommend changing the lens, not using the zoom feature. I also want to point out with camera control, one thing you may not have thought about, but I think that is really great, is that you now have a dedicated hardware button that's dedicated to launching the camera whenever you press it. Sometimes I'll be with my family or at an event, etc., where I really need to record something right away, but if I'm already using my phone, that means I had to go back to the home screen to select the camera, or swipe down and go to the control center, then tap on the camera, or lock the phone and then tap on the camera. It's just a few extra steps. But now with camera control, I think it's really awesome that no matter what you're doing with your phone, the instant that you press the camera control button, the camera app is going to open and be ready for you to start filming or taking photos. Speaking of other hidden upgrades for the iPhone 16 Pro, now you should also know that Apple says that the 16 Pro has a new graphite and aluminum heat dissipation system built into the chassis of the phone that should help prevent it from overheating, which I think is really important considering that this phone now films in 4K at 120 FPS, which can generate a lot of heat very quickly due to the massive amount of data it requires. Of course, because I'm also based in Texas and the iPhone 16 Pro was released at the tail end of summer, so the temperatures are still hitting in the 90s every day, I was very interested to see how the phone would handle recording at these higher temperatures. I'm happy to tell you that in my testing, filming a variety of clips outdoor on a hot day with a variety of frame rates and resolutions constantly, all in ProRes, the phone did get plenty warm and dimmed the screen a bit. It never overheated though or stopped me from using it, so I call that a win. Next, I want to talk about one of the biggest upgrades to the iPhone 16 Pro from really any previous iPhone, and you should know that I was really skeptical of this upgrade whenever Apple mentioned it, but I've been very pleasantly surprised. This upgrade is in the area of audio, which if you are a filmmaker, you know how important audio is for any video. Your audience will forgive shaky footage that's blurry and low resolution, but the instant that you start assaulting their ears with crappy sounding audio, they're going to click away and want to watch something else. So when Apple mentioned that the iPhone 16 Pro now includes 4 studio quality microphones, their words, not mine, as well as some very powerful software customization tools for processing this audio, I was very intrigued. Speaking about the hardware first, though, the iPhone 15 Pro only had 3 microphones, so the 16 Pro is getting 1 more, and these microphones are placed all around the phone so it can record truly 360-degree audio. It's almost like Apple makes a VR headset that you can wear that recording with these microphones in 360 would be really useful for. In addition, with these 4 microphones on the 16 Pro, Apple says that they have a lower noise floor, meaning that the audio should sound cleaner and be less noisy if you have to bring up the audio levels. So of course, I tested this, recording some audio using the voice memos feature on my iPhone 15 Pro, then doing the same on my 16 Pro. Both of these audio samples are recorded in my sound-treated studio here and are just room tone, meaning that I'm not making any sounds. We're just listening for how much noise the iPhone microphones are generating on their own. I've also boosted the gain on both of these examples so you can really hear the difference in noise floor between these 2 microphones. Here's a few seconds of the iPhone 15 Pro. And here's a few seconds of the iPhone 16 Pro. As you can hear, the iPhone 16 Pro's microphones are generating less noise, meaning they have a lower noise floor, and they're going to sound even better. In addition, these mics just sound really good if you're speaking into them too. Here's me just speaking into the iPhone 16 microphone, and as you can hear, the audio from these mics, with me just holding the iPhone like I would a regular microphone, sounds pretty darn good. So if you're like me and you find yourself making a lot of social media videos where you're just using the built-in microphones on your phone, this could be a huge upgrade in audio quality for you and definitely could be a good reason for you to get the iPhone 16 Pro. We are not done yet because we now need to talk about another software update that Apple has added to the iPhone. And this is one that's best used if you can hear the audio that the phone's recording. So welcome to this new picture-in-picture view for the iPhone. And the first thing you need to know is that this new setting is called Audio Mix. And by default, the iPhone is going to record a 360 audio mix from around the phone. But with this Audio Mix tool, you can choose to use certain microphones while canceling the audio of others, giving you directional audio without you needing to put a giant shotgun microphone on the front of your phone. Now, the main thing that I want you to keep in mind is that this Audio Mix setting is tunable, and you can adjust the intensity of the mix to make it weaker or stronger. For example, in this test I'm about to show you, I have the intensity set to 50, and while it sounded great on my iPhone playing it back, it didn't sound as good on my computer. So just be aware that you may need to tweak this intensity setting whenever you are editing your sound with this Audio Mix feature. The in-frame option is going to be great if you're recording multiple people speaking and you only want the mic to pick up people that are in the frame. Unfortunately, it's just me, but imagine that I was also over here, and so the camera's going to pick up audio that's in the frame. Next, you have the studio setting, which is going to tune the microphones to sound like you're recording a podcast in a studio. So, for example, I currently have some sound effects that make it sound like I'm in a very loud coffee shop, but because I'm here in the frame and the iPhone is doing some mixing to make it sound like I'm in a studio, it's going to be deadening those sounds. So, for example, if I turn that off, here's how it sounds. Pretty darn loud coffee pouring, things like that. But turn studio back on. Lastly, you have the cinematic audio setting, which essentially uses all of the iPhone's microphones to record all of the audio around the phone, but then it mixes all the audio in real time, so it sounds like it's coming from the front where the camera is recording. And Apple says this is the same way that surround sound will be formatted for movies, so feel free to play around with this if you want, but like I said, the first 2 are the ones that I think you're probably going to be using the most. So as you can see, while I've seen a decent amount of people being negative about the iPhone 16 Pro, saying that they aren't as excited about it as they were about the 15 Pro, I don't think that that sentiment really applies for us as filmmakers or anyone who records video with their phone, because as you can see in this video, Apple has packed a ton of useful features for filmmakers into the 16 Pro. And by the way, we didn't even really touch on battery life, but the battery life is stellar as well. Even if you're filming a ton of video clips, it should keep going all day, which is great. So here's my take. If you are considering upgrading to the 16 Pro from an Android phone, which to be clear, I do not want to start a big war in the comments, but Samsung and Pixel, etc. do not have a high quality pro level video codec like ProRes or a high dynamic range log profile like Apple Log. So there's really no comparison here. Apple solidly beats the vast majority of Android phones in video quality. Or if you are considering upgrading to the 16 Pro from any iPhone prior to the 15 Pro, like the 14, 13, 12, 11, etc., you should know that the 16 Pro is going to be a massive upgrade for you in terms of video quality, and I think that you're going to absolutely love the videos that you're able to create with it. And side note, by the way, because I know people are going to ask, I've seen a lot of people having the sentiment that you should upgrade to the regular 16 instead of the 16 Pro this year. But keep in mind that for filmmaking, Apple is only enabling ProRes and Apple Log support on their Pro phone models. And considering just how good Apple Log footage looks, trust me, you want to go with the Pro. Thanks so much for watching. If you've been considering getting into wedding filmmaking, which remember, I did film a wedding with the iPhone 15 Pro, I would highly recommend checking out my free workshop that I put together. It's going to show you how to book your next wedding in 30 days or less. This workshop is going to put you on the fast track to starting a filmmaking business and making potentially thousands of dollars on the weekend. I will link to this free workshop down in the video description. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more videos about filmmaking with the iPhone or filmmaking in general. And let me know what other videos you want to see from me. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.